$209 billion.
That's the number.
$209 billion. For context, that's roughly the entire GDP of Portugal. That's enough to buy every NFL team twice over. That's more money than the entire Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II.
Adjusted for inflation, yes.
And NASA spent it on a vehicle that was supposed to cost $20 million per flight, but ended up costing $1.6 billion. A vehicle that was supposed to launch 50 times a year, but never flew more than 9. A vehicle that was supposed to make space travel routine and affordable, but instead killed 14 astronauts in 2 catastrophic disasters.
The Space Shuttle is perhaps the most controversial spacecraft ever built.
And today, we're going to tear it apart, figuratively, because the real thing already did that twice. Welcome to the $209 billion Space Shuttle, history's most expensive program. I'm Marcus Chen.
And I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez. And Marcus, before you get too far into righteous indignation mode, I should point out that the shuttle also built the International Space Station, saved the Hubble Space Telescope from being a billion-dollar piece of space junk, and kept American astronauts flying for 30 years.
Oh, we're going to talk about the achievements, but we're also going to talk about how NASA promised Congress a space pickup truck and deliver the temperamental race car that needed months of maintenance between drives.
That's actually a pretty good analogy.
I have my moments, so buckle up, because for the next 2 hours, we're going deep into the most expensive, most tragic, most triumphant, and most frustrating chapter in American space history. All right, Elena, let's start at the beginning. It's 1972, Richard Nixon is in the White House, and NASA comes to him with a proposal. Set the scene for me.
So you have to understand the context. It's 3 years after Apollo 11, the moon landing. America has won the space race, and NASA is desperately trying to figure out what comes next.
Because the public lost interest pretty quickly after one small step, right?
Exactly. The last 3 Apollo missions were canceled due to budget cuts and public apathy. In 1966, at the peak of Apollo, NASA's budget was 4.4% of the federal budget. By 1972, Nixon had slashed it to 1.6%.
That's a massive cut.
Brutal. So NASA presents Nixon with this grand vision, a space transportation system. The idea was a fully reusable space shuttle that would fly like an airline, a permanent space station, lunar bases, and eventually missions to Mars. All interconnected, all building on each other.
And Nixon said...
Too expensive. He greenlit only the shuttle, figuring it would be the cheapest piece and could maybe justify the rest later. But here's the critical part. Without the space station to shuttle to, the shuttle didn't really have a clear purpose.
So they built a truck before they built the warehouse it was supposed to service.
Precisely. And that fundamental problem would haunt the program for its entire existence.
Okay, but the promises they made to get the shuttle approved, those are almost comical in hindsight. Walk me through what NASA told Congress.
This is where it gets painful. NASA Administrator James Fletcher told Congress in 1972 that the shuttle would cost $5.15 billion to develop and could be operated at a cost of $10.5 million per flight.
$10 million per flight?
That was the sales pitch. They projected flights occurring as often as once a week, 50 launches per year. The cost to deliver payload to low Earth orbit would be as low as $118 per pound.
And the actual numbers?
The program ultimately cost $209 billion over 30 years. Per flight cost averaged $1.6 billion. They never flew more than 9 times in a single year, and the average was about 4 flights per year. Cost per pound to orbit ended up around $27,000, not $118.
So they missed their cost per pound estimate by a factor of, over 200.
229 times higher than promised, to be precise.
Elena, if I promised my boss I'd finish a project for $100 and then handed them a bill for $23,000, I'd be fired. I'd be unemployable. I might be in prison.
Government contracting works differently, but yes, the gap between promise and reality is staggering.
How did they get the numbers so wrong? Were they lying, or were they just spectacularly incompetent?
That's the million-dollar question, or I guess the $209 billion question. The charitable interpretation is that they genuinely believed reusability would drive costs down dramatically. The less charitable interpretation is that they knew the real numbers would never get approved, so they lowballed everything to get the program started.
The foot-in-the-door strategy.
Right. Once you spend a few $1 billion on development, it becomes politically impossible to cancel. They were betting that Congress wouldn't pull the plug once the money was flowing.
And they were right.
They were right, but it came at an enormous cost, not just financial, but in terms of what NASA couldn't do because all its resources were tied up in the shuttle.
We'll definitely get to that. But first, I want to understand the design decisions that made this thing so expensive. Because the shuttle was supposed to be cheap because it was reusable. That was the whole point.
Right. And this is where the story gets really interesting and really frustrating. The shuttle that flew was not the shuttle that was originally designed. Budget cuts and political compromises fundamentally changed the vehicle.
How so?
The original concept was a fully reusable two-stage system. You'd have a large crewed booster that would carry the orbiter to a certain altitude, separate, and both vehicles would fly back and land like airplanes. Nothing would be thrown away.
That sounds elegant.
It was elegant, and it would have been incredibly expensive to develop. When the budget couldn't support it, NASA started making compromises. The crewed booster became solid rocket boosters that would parachute into the ocean and be refurbished. The external fuel tank became expendable, thrown away every flight.
So the reusable spacecraft was only partially reusable?
Exactly. The orbiter itself was reusable, the solid rocket boosters were recoverable and refurbishable, but that giant orange tank? Gone, every flight. That alone added massive per-flight costs.
And there's another design compromise I've read about, the Air Force involvement?
Ah, yes, the military requirements. NASA needed Air Force support to justify the shuttle's budget, so they gave the military input on the design. The Air Force wanted the ability to launch into polar orbit from Vandenberg Air Force Base and return after a single orbit.
Why would they want that?
Classified. The idea was to launch, deploy a spy satellite or do reconnaissance, and land before the Soviets even knew you were up there.
But that requirement demanded enormous cross-range capability, the ability to glide sideways during re-entry.
Which affected the wing design hugely. The Air Force requirement forced NASA to adopt those massive delta wings. The original design had much smaller stub wings. The delta wings added weight, added drag, required thousands more heat-resistant tiles, and dramatically increased both the complexity and the maintenance costs.
And here's the kicker. Did the Air Force ever actually use the shuttle for those polar orbit missions?
Never. Not once. The polar launch capability from Vandenberg was canceled after Challenger. The military launched exactly 11 classified missions on the shuttle, all from Florida, and eventually switched entirely to expendable rockets.
So NASA fundamentally compromised their spacecraft design for a military requirement that was never actually used.
Welcome to government aerospace procurement.
This is already painful, and we haven't even gotten to the disasters yet. Okay, let's talk about the heat shield because this becomes critically important later. The shuttle's thermal protection system, the tiles, these were revolutionary, right?
Revolutionary and nightmarish, depending on who you ask. The shuttle needed protection from the searing heat of re-entry, temperatures up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Traditional spacecraft used ablative heat shields that burn away during re-entry.
Like the Apollo capsules.
Right, but ablative shields can only be used once. For a reusable vehicle, NASA developed something entirely new, silica tiles that were so effective at insulation that you could hold a blowtorch to one side and touch the other side with your bare hand.
That's actually incredible.
It is. But here's the problem. The shuttle needed over 24,000 of these tiles, and each one was unique. They weren't interchangeable. Each tile was shaped specifically for its position on the orbiter.
24,000 custom tiles?
And they were fragile. One engineer described how the light touch of a thumbnail could dent parts of the thermal protection system. These tiles had to withstand 3,000-degree heat, but could be damaged by someone bumping into them during maintenance.
That seems like a design flaw.
It was a design compromise. The tiles were lightweight and incredibly effective at their primary job, but they required constant inspection and maintenance. After every flight, technicians had to examine and often replace tiles. It took months to turn a shuttle around for the next flight.
Which is why they could never achieve the flight-a-week cadence.
Exactly. The original vision was airline-like operations. Land, refuel, do a quick check, launch again. The reality was more like rebuilding half the vehicle between each flight.
And then there was the external tank, the big orange thing.
The external tank. It carried the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen fuel for the main engines, and it was covered with insulating foam to prevent ice from forming on the super cold tank.
Foam that had a tendency to fall off.
From the very first shuttle launch, foam shedding was observed. Pieces of foam would break off during launch and strike the orbiter. On the very first flight of Columbia in 1981, foam debris destroyed over 300 heat-resistant tiles.
300 tiles on the very first flight?
On the very first flight. And here's the critical cultural failure. Instead of treating this as a serious design flaw that needed to be fixed, NASA gradually came to accept it as normal. They called it an accepted flight risk.
Because the shuttles kept coming back okay.
Right. Flight after flight, foam would shed, tiles would get damaged, but nothing catastrophic happened. So the perception shifted. What should have been treated as a serious safety concern became background noise.
There's a term for this, isn't there, in organizational psychology?
Normalization of deviance. Sociologist Diane Vaughan coined the term specifically in her study of the Challenger disaster. It's when an organization gradually comes to accept behaviors and conditions that deviate from their original safety standards simply because they haven't resulted in disaster yet.
We got away with it before, so it must be fine.
Exactly. And it's insidious because it happens gradually. No single decision seems unreasonable in isolation, but cumulatively, you drift further and further from safe operations until you're accepting risks that would have horrified the original designers.
And this mindset would prove fatal. Twice.
14 lives. And the tragic part is that both disasters were predicted by engineers who couldn't get management to listen.
We're going to talk about the morning of January 28, 1986, a day that should never have happened. All right, Elena, we're talking about the $209 billion Space Shuttle program. And now we need to discuss the first disaster, the loss of Space Shuttle Challenger and her 7 crew members on January 28, 1986.
This is difficult to talk about, Marcus, even after all these years, because Challenger wasn't an unknowable risk that materialized out of nowhere. It was a predicted, preventable disaster that happened because of management failures and schedule pressure.
Let's start with the crew, because they deserve to be remembered as people, not just statistics.
Absolutely. The commander was Dick Scobie, an experienced test pilot. The pilot was Michael Smith. Mission specialists were Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Ronald McNair. Then there was payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and of course, Krista McAuliffe.
The teacher.
The teacher in space. NASA had created this program to generate public interest, put an ordinary citizen on the shuttle to show how routine and safe spaceflight had become. McAuliffe was selected from over 11,000 applicants. She was going to teach lessons from orbit.
And millions of school children are watching the launch live.
Including my generation. I was 11 years old, watching in my classroom. The image of that explosion, that Y-shaped plume of smoke, it seared into the memory of everyone who saw it.
Let's talk about what went wrong, because this is where the engineering and management failures intersect in the most tragic way possible.
The immediate cause was the failure of an O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. These O-rings were rubber seals at the joints between the rocket segments. Their job was to contain the hot combustion gases inside the booster.
And they failed because of the cold weather.
Florida was experiencing unusually cold temperatures. The night before the launch, temperatures dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing. The morning of the launch, it was still only 36 degrees at launch time.
And rubber doesn't perform well in cold temperatures.
Rubber loses its flexibility. The O-rings were supposed to compress and spring back to maintain the seal when the booster segments shifted during ignition, but cold rubber doesn't spring back quickly enough. The engineers at Morton Thiokol, the contractor that built the solid rocket boosters, knew this.
They knew it and they tried to stop the launch.
This is the part that haunts everyone who studies this disaster. The night before the launch, Morton Thiokol engineers held a teleconference with NASA management. Roger Boisjoli and other engineers presented data showing O-ring erosion on previous flights, particularly when temperatures were cold.
What did Boisjoli recommend?
He and his colleagues recommended against launching below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. They explicitly said the O-rings would not function properly in the forecasted temperatures.
And NASA's response?
NASA officials were stunned. They had never received a no-go recommendation like this from a major contractor, and they pushed back hard. One NASA manager reportedly said, "My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?"
So they prioritized schedule over safety.
The shuttle program was under enormous schedule pressure. They had ambitious launch manifests. They were trying to demonstrate routine operations. They had payloads with time-sensitive windows, and this launch had already been delayed multiple times.
What happened to the engineers' recommendation?
Morton Thiokol management asked for a private caucus a few minutes offline to discuss. When they came back, they had reversed the recommendation. The engineers were overruled by their own executives.
That's devastating.
Alan McDonald, Thiokol's director of the booster program, was at Kennedy Space Center. When he heard management had changed the recommendation, he refused to sign the launch approval. He told NASA directly that Thiokol was so concerned they had recommended against launching. He was the only Thiokol official to openly dissent.
And NASA launched anyway.
The next morning, Challenger lifted off at 11:38 Eastern Time. What the engineers had feared happened within the first second of ignition.
Walk us through those 73 seconds.
At ignition, the cold O-ring in the right solid rocket booster failed to seal properly. Hot combustion gases, over 5,000 degrees, began blowing past the failed seal. Initially, the breach was partially plugged by combustion residue, which is why Challenger cleared the launch pad.
A temporary reprieve.
For about a minute. At 58 seconds in flight, the shuttle encountered a period of maximum aerodynamic pressure, what's called Mach-Q. It also hit high-altitude wind shear that jostled the vehicle. The temporary seal broke loose.
And then,
a visible flame began jetting out of the right booster, like a blowtorch aimed directly at the external fuel tank. This flame burned through the strut, holding the booster to the tank, and penetrated the tank itself.
which was full of hydrogen.
At 73 seconds after launch, traveling at nearly twice the speed of sound, the external tank ruptured. The structural failure of the tank, combined with the aerodynamic forces, caused the entire stack to break apart. What viewers saw wasn't technically an explosion, it was a rapid, catastrophic disintegration.
The crew cabin.
The crew cabin remained largely intact through the initial breakup. Evidence suggests at least some crew members survived the disintegration. Several emergency air packs were found activated. The cabin fell for 2.5 minutes before impacting the ocean at over 200 miles per hour. That impact was not survivable.
I need a moment here. This is horrific.
Take your time.
So, the engineers knew, they tried to stop it, and their concerns were overruled for schedule reasons.
Roger Boisjoli later described the launch decision as the result of pressure from NASA. He called it an unethical decision-making forum resulting from intense customer intimidation.
What happened to Beaujolais after he testified to the Rogers Commission?
He was shunned. His own colleagues and managers at Morton Thiokol ostracized him. He was removed from space project assignments. He suffered from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. The only gesture of support he received after his testimony was a hug from Sally Ride, who was on the commission.
Sally Ride, the first American woman in space.
She was the only one, Beaujolais later said. The only one.
He became a whistleblower pariah.
Eventually, he resigned and spent the rest of his career lecturing about organizational ethics and the importance of engineers speaking up. He died in 2012, never fully recovered from what he witnessed and experienced.
And Bob Ebeling, there was another engineer who tried to stop the launch, right?
Bob Ebeling spent 30 years consumed with guilt. He was one of 5 engineers who tried to stop the launch. The morning of January 28th, he told his daughter, "The Challenger's going to blow up. Everyone's going to die." He was beating his fist on the dashboard, frantic.
He knew.
He knew. And when it happened, he wept loudly in the conference room where Thiokol engineers were watching the launch. He never forgave himself, even though it wasn't his fault.
In 2016, NPR did a story on Ebeling. What happened then?
It was remarkable. Ebeling was 89 years old, still carrying this burden. After the story aired, he received an outpouring of support. Former colleagues, even some of the managers who had overruled him, reached out to tell him it wasn't his fault. NASA sent a statement saying the deaths served as a reminder to remain vigilant and to listen to those who have the courage to speak up.
Did it help?
His family said the burden finally began to lift. He died a few weeks later. His last message to those who reached out: "You helped bring my worrisome mind to ease. You have to have an end to everything."
Long pause. We need to talk about what changed after Challenger. What did NASA learn?
The Rogers Commission, chaired by former Secretary of State William Rogers, conducted a thorough investigation. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, was on the commission and famously demonstrated the O-ring failure by dipping a piece of the rubber into ice water during the hearings.
That image is iconic. Feynman with a glass of ice water and a C-clamp.
He showed that cold rubber loses its resilience. Simple, devastating demonstration. His appendix to the commission report is legendary. He calculated that NASA management estimate of shuttle reliability was wildly optimistic. They claimed one failure in 100,000 flights.
What did the engineers estimate?
When Feynman anonymously polled NASA engineers, they estimated one failure in 100 flights.
And the actual rate?
2 failures in 135 flights, about 1 in 67, nearly 1,500 times worse than management claimed.
So the engineers were actually pretty close.
The people who understood the hardware knew the risks. The people making decisions either didn't understand or didn't want to.
What changes came out of Challenger?
Massive redesign of the solid rocket boosters, new joint designs, new O-ring configurations, addition of heaters to maintain temperature. NASA was grounded for 32 months while these changes were implemented. Management structures were overhauled. Safety oversight was supposed to be strengthened.
Supposed to be.
Yes, because 17 years, almost to the day, we lost another shuttle. And the Columbia Accident Investigation Board would conclude that many of the same organizational failures were still present.
February 1st, 2003. Space Shuttle Columbia breaks apart during re-entry over Texas, killing all 7 crew members. Elena, how did we end up here again?
That's the question that haunted everyone who studied Challenger. How could the same organization, having learned such painful lessons, make the same fundamental mistakes?
Let's start with the mission. What was Columbia doing?
STS-107 was a research mission. Columbia carried the Space-HAB Research Double Module, essentially a laboratory in the cargo bay. The crew conducted dozens of experiments in biology, physics, and material science. It was Columbia's 28th flight, the oldest orbiter in the fleet.
And the crew?
Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialists Michael Anderson, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, and Laurel Clark. Payload specialist Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli astronaut.
What went wrong?
82 seconds after launch, a suitcase-sized piece of insulating foam broke off the external tank and struck Columbia's left wing. This happened right in the bipod area, where the orbiter attaches to the tank.
The foam problem we talked about earlier.
The foam problem that had been occurring since the very first shuttle flight in 1981, the same accepted flight risk that had become normalized over 22 years.
Did anyone notice the strike during launch?
Not in real time. The next day, engineers reviewing launch footage spotted it. What they couldn't determine from the video was how severe the damage was.
So they asked for better imaging.
Here's where the organizational failures become heartbreaking. Rodney Rocha, NASA's chief structural engineer, recognized the potential danger. He asked for high-resolution images. Specifically, he wanted the Department of Defense to use its spy satellites to photograph Columbia's wing from orbit.
That seems reasonable.
It was eminently reasonable. In memos, Rocha warned of grave hazards and catastrophic thermal damage during re-entry. One email from an engineer literally asked, "Can we petition, beg for outside agency assistance?"
And management's response?
The requests were declined. Some weren't even passed up the chain. Management had already concluded that foam strikes weren't dangerous because, as they kept saying, shuttles had survived them before.
The normalization of deviance again.
Exactly. Linda Ham, the mission management team chair, asked at one point, "Who's requesting the photos?" as if the concern was about hierarchy and protocol rather than the actual hazard.
They were more concerned about who was making waves than what the waves were about.
The Columbia Accident Investigation Board later wrote that management required technical experts to prove that the debris strike created a safety of flight issue. Engineers had to produce evidence that the system was unsafe rather than prove that it was safe.
That's backwards. That's completely backwards.
In any legitimate safety culture, the default assumption should be that you prove something is safe before proceeding. NASA had inverted the burden of proof.
Was there any option to rescue the Columbia crew?
The investigation board analyzed this extensively. In theory, if the damage had been confirmed early enough, Space Shuttle Atlantis could have been prepared for an emergency rescue mission. The crew could have stretched their supplies for about 30 days.
30 days to launch a rescue mission from scratch?
It would have been extraordinarily difficult and risky. Every shortcut would need to be taken, every timeline compressed. But the board concluded it was theoretically possible. The problem was, no one ever asked the question because management had decided the damage wasn't serious.
What happened during the 16 days of the mission?
For the crew, everything seemed normal. They weren't told about the debris strike in detail. When Commander Husband and Pilot McCool were informed, they received an email saying there was no concern for RCC or tile damage because the phenomenon had been seen before. The email concluded with, "Absolutely no concern for entry."
They were told not to worry.
One NASA official, John Harpold, actually said something chilling when engineers raised concerns. "Don't you think it would be better for them to have a happy, successful flight and die unexpectedly during entry than to stay in orbit knowing that there was nothing to be done until the air ran out?"
That's fatalistic to the point of negligence.
The mindset was, even if there is damage, we can't fix it, so why bother knowing about it? Which ignores the fact that they didn't actually know whether a repair or rescue was possible because they never investigated.
Walk me through February 1st, 2003.
Columbia executed its deorbit burn and began re-entry. The damaged area of the left wing was exactly where the leading edge met the hottest temperatures during atmospheric penetration, over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
And there was a hole there.
A breach in the reinforced carbon-carbon. Superheated plasma began entering the wing structure. The first indications of trouble came from sensors in the left wing showing unusual temperature increases.
Did Mission Control see this?
They saw sensor readings that were off normal, but they had no context to understand what was happening. Ground observers in California and Nevada began reporting debris shedding from the orbiter.
pieces were falling off.
The left wing was coming apart from the inside out. At 8:59 a.m. Eastern Time, Mission Control lost all contact with Columbia. Commander Husband's last transmission was cut off mid-word.
What happened next?
The structural failure cascaded rapidly. The compromised wing failed, causing the orbiter to tumble out of control at Mach 18. At those speeds, aerodynamic forces tore the vehicle apart. Debris rained down across eastern Texas and western Louisiana.
The crew cabin?
Unlike Challenger, the breakup occurred at much higher altitude and speed. The crew module was subjected to extreme forces. The investigation determined that the crew was incapacitated within seconds of the structural breakup due to loss of cabin pressure and thermal exposure. They did not suffer.
Small mercy.
The only one.
The Columbia Accident Investigation Board. What did they find?
The board spent 7 months and produced one of the most thorough accident investigations in history. Their conclusion was damning. In our view, the NASA organizational culture had as much to do with this accident as the foam.
Cultural failure, not just technical failure.
The board found that many of the same problems identified after Challenger were still present 17 years later. Schedule pressure, communication barriers, management dismissing engineering concerns, normalization of deviance. The report said NASA's culture allowed foam shedding to become viewed as inevitable and ultimately an accepted risk.
So all the changes after Challenger, all the soul-searching, the reorganizations, they didn't fix the fundamental problems?
Some improvements were real and lasting, but culture is hard to change, especially in large organizations. New leaders came in with different priorities, budgets were cut. The shuttle was being pushed to complete the International Space Station on schedule. The pressures that had contributed to Challenger reasserted themselves.
What changed after Columbia?
President George W. Bush announced that the shuttle would be retired after completing ISS construction. No more open-ended commitment. NASA implemented extensive post-Columbia safety measures, better imaging of launches, tile inspection procedures, on-orbit repair capabilities, and a requirement that shuttles always have the ISS as a safe haven in case of damage.
Except for one mission.
The final Hubble servicing mission, STS-125. Hubble is in a different orbit than the ISS. The shuttle couldn't reach both. For that mission, they had a second shuttle, Endeavour, sitting on the pad ready to launch a rescue mission if Atlantis was found to be damaged.
How did the remaining shuttle missions go?
22 more flights after Columbia, all without major incident. The program ended on July 21, 2011, when Atlantis touched down at Kennedy Space Center for the last time.
14 astronauts dead, $209 billion spent, and in the end, America had to hitch rides with the Russians to get to space.
For 9 years, until SpaceX's Crew Dragon began flying in 2020. The shuttle's retirement created a gap in American human spaceflight capability that took nearly a decade to fill.
All right, Elena, we've spent an hour talking about disasters, cost overruns, and organizational failures. In fairness to the shuttle program, let's talk about what it actually accomplished.
Thank you, Marcus, because the shuttle's legacy isn't purely negative. It's complicated, like most things in life.
Let's start with the big one, the Hubble Space Telescope.
Hubble is arguably the shuttle's greatest achievement, and it's a perfect case study of why having humans in space sometimes matters. The shuttle deployed Hubble in April 1990, and then almost immediately they discovered a problem.
The mirror was flawed.
The primary mirror had a spherical aberration. Essentially, it was the wrong shape by about 1/50th the width of a human hair. That tiny error meant Hubble couldn't focus properly. It was a national embarrassment. NASA had launched a $1.5 billion telescope that couldn't see straight.
And here's where the shuttle earned its keep.
In December 1993, Space Shuttle Endeavour launched on STS-61, the first Hubble servicing mission. Over 5 spacewalks, a record at the time, astronauts installed corrective optics that fixed the mirror problem. They also replaced solar arrays, installed new instruments, and performed extensive repairs.
And Hubble went from national embarrassment to scientific treasure.
The transformation was remarkable. The first images after the repair were stunning. Hubble has since contributed to nearly every area of astronomy, measuring the age of the universe, discovering that the universe's expansion is accelerating, capturing the deepest images of distant galaxies ever taken.
How many servicing missions were there total?
5. Each one upgraded instruments, replaced failing components, and extended Hubble's life. The final mission in 2009 was particularly dramatic. Astronauts repaired instruments that were never designed to be serviced in space. They removed 111 tiny screws to access and repair the Space Telescope imaging spectrograph.
And Hubble is still operating today.
Still operating, still producing groundbreaking science, because astronauts could physically go there and fix things. That capability was unique to the shuttle.
Okay, what about the International Space Station?
The ISS might be the shuttle's most significant legacy. That station, the largest structure ever built in space, was assembled almost entirely by shuttle missions. The shuttle launched the major components, the structural modules, the solar arrays, the laboratory modules from Europe and Japan.
How many shuttle flights went into building the ISS?
37 shuttle missions docked with the ISS over the course of construction. The shuttle carried over 3 million pounds of cargo into orbit during its 30-year career, more than half the total payload weight launched by all vehicles worldwide since 1957.
Wait, more than half of everything ever launched?
The shuttle's payload capacity was enormous, about 50,000 pounds to low Earth orbit. That's why it was essential for ISS construction. No other vehicle at the time could lift the large modules and trusses the station needed.
And the ISS itself has been continuously occupied since November 2000.
25 years of continuous human presence in space made possible by the shuttle. Whatever criticisms we can level at the program, that's a genuine achievement.
What else did the shuttle accomplish?
The numbers are impressive. 135 missions, 355 individual astronauts from 16 countries, nearly 1,400 days in space total. The shuttle deployed satellites, retrieved and repaired them in orbit, carried scientific experiments, enabled microgravity research.
It also flew the first American woman, the first African American in space, the first Hispanic American.
Sally Ride in 1983, Guy Bluford in 1983, Franklin Chang Diaz in 1986. The shuttle program dramatically diversified who went to space. The oldest person to fly in space, John Glenn at 77 in 1998, went on the shuttle.
So the shuttle opened space up to a broader range of people.
It did, and it normalized the idea of space travel in ways Apollo never did. Apollo astronauts were mythic heroes. Shuttle astronauts were scientists, engineers, teachers, even a senator. The shuttle made space seem accessible.
Even if accessible came with a $1.6 billion per flight price tag.
Even then, the perception mattered.
Let me push back a little here, because some of these achievements feel like they happened despite the shuttle's limitations, not because of its strengths.
How do you mean?
Well, Hubble needed servicing because we launched it flawed. The ISS took decades to build, partly because of shuttle delays and disasters. And NASA's own administrator, Michael Griffin, argued that if we'd kept using Saturn-era technology, we could have accomplished more for the same money.
Ah, the Griffin paper. That's a fascinating counterfactual.
What did he argue?
In 2007, Griffin wrote a paper arguing that if NASA had continued the Saturn program and used commercially available boosters instead of developing the shuttle, they could have achieved 6 crewed launches per year, 2 of them to the moon, at the same cost as the shuttle program.
To the moon?
His quote was devastating. If we had done all this, we would be on Mars today, not writing about it as a subject for the next 50 years. We would have decades of experience operating long-duration space systems in Earth orbit, and similar decades of experience in exploring and learning to utilize the moon.
So the head of NASA himself believed the shuttle was the wrong choice.
Griffin is controversial, but he's not alone in that assessment. Many space policy experts argue that the shuttle locked NASA into low Earth orbit for decades, consuming resources that could have gone to more ambitious exploration.
The shuttle was supposed to be the first step towards the moon and Mars. Instead, it became the only step.
That's the tragedy at the heart of the program. It was conceived as part of a larger architecture that never materialized. Without the station, without the lunar base, without Mars missions, the shuttle became a vehicle looking for a destination.
And the destination it found was just going around and around in low Earth orbit.
For 30 years, at $1.6 billion per trip.
All right, let's talk about what really crystallizes the shuttle's cost problem, comparing it to what SpaceX is doing today.
This is where the numbers become almost absurd.
Give me the comparison.
The shuttle cost about $1.5 to $1.6 billion per flight, depending on how you calculate it. It could launch 27,500 kilograms to low Earth orbit. That works out to roughly $54,500 per kilogram.
And SpaceX?
A Falcon 9 launch costs about $67 million and can put 22,800 kilograms into low Earth orbit. That's about $2,720 per kilogram.
Let me do that math. The shuttle cost 20 times more per kilogram than Falcon 9.
20 times. And if you use the marginal cost SpaceX reports for a reused booster, around $15 million, the comparison becomes even more stark. You could launch roughly 25 Falcon 9 missions for the cost of one shuttle flight.
25 rockets for the price of one shuttle launch.
And here's what's really galling. The shuttle was supposed to achieve low costs through reusability. That was the whole premise. SpaceX actually achieved it.
How? What did SpaceX do differently?
Several things. First, vertical integration. SpaceX builds most of its components in-house rather than contracting everything out. That reduces costs and improves quality control.
The shuttle had hundreds of contractors spread across the country.
It was essentially a government jobs program. Components were built in different states to ensure political support. SpaceX operates more like a commercial business. Efficiency matters.
What else?
Design philosophy. The Falcon 9 was designed from the start for reusability and rapid turnaround. The first stage lands itself on a drone ship at sea or back at the launch site. It's then inspected and reflown, sometimes within weeks.
The shuttle was also designed for reusability.
Designed for it, but never achieved it in practice. The shuttle orbiter needed months of refurbishment between flights. Those 24,000 tiles had to be inspected and often replaced. The solid rocket boosters were recovered from the ocean, which meant corrosion, which meant extensive refurbishment.
Salt water is bad for rockets. Who knew?
The Falcon 9's propulsive landing means the booster never touches water. It lands on its feet, gets inspected, and flies again. Some boosters have flown over 20 times.
And the shuttle main engines?
The RS-25 engines were engineering marvels, the most advanced rocket engines ever built. But they required thousands of hours of maintenance between flights. Those engines are actually now being used for the Space Launch System, NASA's new rocket, which costs over $4 billion per launch.
$4 billion? That's even worse than the shuttle.
Welcome to government aerospace. The SLS uses leftover shuttle hardware, the engines, the solid rocket boosters, and it's expendable. You throw away a $4 billion rocket every time.
This is painful.
It's a political program, not an engineering one. The same congressional districts that built shuttle components now build SLS components. Jobs are preserved, contractors are happy, taxpayers foot the bill.
So the shuttle's cost problems weren't unique. They were symptoms of how NASA does business?
Partly, NASA operates under constraints that commercial companies don't. Congressional oversight, contracting requirements, workforce preservation mandates. Every decision gets filtered through political considerations.
And SpaceX just doesn't have those constraints.
SpaceX is privately held and can make decisions based purely on what works best technically and economically. When something isn't working, they can change course quickly. They've been known to scrap entire approaches overnight if they find a better way.
But SpaceX receives NASA funding. They're not completely independent.
True, NASA's Commercial Crew and Commercial Cargo programs provided crucial early funding. But the contract structure is different. SpaceX gets paid for delivering results, not for employing a certain number of people in certain states.
Results-based versus jobs-based.
It's a simplification, but yes, the commercial approach has delivered dramatically lower costs.
Let's put some numbers on this.
The entire shuttle program cost $209 billion over 30 years. What could that buy in SpaceX launches?
At $67 million per Falcon 9, $209 billion would buy over 3,100 launches.
3,000 launches?
The shuttle flew 135 times total. You could have over 20 times as many Falcon 9s for the same money.
And in terms of payload capacity?
The shuttle delivered 3.5 million pounds of cargo over its entire 30-year career. At SpaceX prices, you could launch about 70 million kilograms, over 150 million pounds for the same budget.
That's 40 times more cargo.
Now, to be fair, these comparisons have limits. The shuttle could do things Falcon 9 can't: bring payloads back from orbit, repair satellites, provide a shirt-sleeve environment for astronauts during spacewalks. The shuttle was a more capable vehicle in some ways.
But 40 times the cargo for the same price?
The cost differential is real and significant, and it raises uncomfortable questions about what NASA could have achieved if the shuttle had been canceled earlier and those resources directed elsewhere.
What's the human spaceflight comparison? How much does it cost to send an astronaut to the ISS on SpaceX versus the shuttle?
NASA's estimated cost per seat on the shuttle was somewhere between $150 and $250 million, depending on how you allocate costs. SpaceX charges NASA about $55 million per seat on Crew Dragon.
1/3 to 1/5 the price.
And SpaceX is flying more frequently. In 2024 alone, SpaceX launched more crewed missions to the ISS than the shuttle averaged per year.
Has NASA acknowledged this cost revolution?
NASA commissioned studies that confirmed commercial launch has reduced costs by factors of 4 to 20, depending on the mission type. There's a 2020 NASA technical report that lays this out explicitly.
So the agency knows.
The agency knows. The question is what to do about it. Some within NASA argue for embracing commercial approaches entirely. Others point out that NASA has different responsibilities: safety oversight, international partnerships, workforce development. Every decision gets filtered through political considerations.
And others are protecting their budgets and jobs.
That, too. Institutional inertia is real. The people who build expensive government rockets have every incentive to keep building expensive government rockets.
Let's wrap up with the legacy of the shuttle and what lessons we should actually learn from this $209 billion experiment.
Now, our final segment on the $209 billion Space Shuttle program. Elena, after everything we've discussed, the costs, the disasters, the achievements, how should we evaluate the shuttle's legacy?
It's genuinely complicated, Marcus. The shuttle succeeded at some things spectacularly, failed at others catastrophically, and exists in this uncomfortable middle ground where it's hard to say definitively whether it was worth it.
Let me try to summarize the case against.
Go ahead.
The shuttle was sold as cheap, routine access to space. $20 million per flight, 50 launches per year. It delivered $1.6 billion per flight and an average of 4 launches per year. The cost overrun isn't a factor of 2 or 3, it's a factor of 80 in cost per flight and a factor of 10 in flight rate. NASA promised a minivan and delivered a race car that needed months of maintenance between drives.
That's fair.
The program killed 14 astronauts in 2 disasters that were both predicted by engineers who couldn't get management to listen. The same organizational failures that caused Challenger were found again 17 years later in Columbia. The shuttle locked NASA into low Earth orbit for 3 decades, consuming resources that could have gone to the Moon or Mars.
Also fair.
The shuttle retired. America had no way to launch its own astronauts for 9 years. The world's leading spacefaring nation was hitching rides with Russia.
Now let me offer the case for.
Please.
The shuttle kept American astronauts flying continuously for 30 years. It launched and serviced the Hubble Space Telescope, which transformed our understanding of the universe. It built the International Space Station, enabling 25 years of continuous human presence in space. It flew 355 astronauts from 16 countries, opened spaceflight to scientists, engineers, and educators, and normalized the idea that space was a place humans could work.
those are real accomplishments.
The shuttle demonstrated capabilities that no other vehicle has matched. It could launch, work in orbit, retrieve satellites, and bring massive payloads back to Earth. The STS-61 mission that fixed Hubble remains one of the most impressive feats of human spaceflight ever accomplished.
So where does that leave us?
I think the honest answer is that the shuttle was the wrong vehicle for its time, but it was the vehicle we had, and we made the best of it. The tragedy isn't that the shuttle flew, it's that it had to fly for so long without a successor.
The 30-year gap between original design life and actual retirement.
The shuttle was designed for a 10 to 15-year operational life. NASA planned to replace it with something better. But budget cuts, changing priorities, and political realities meant the replacement never came. So the shuttle kept flying, decade after decade, with technology frozen in the 1970s.
What should we actually learn from all this?
Several things. First, be honest about costs. NASA's lowball estimates to get the program approved created expectations that could never be met. That dishonesty poisoned public trust and political support for decades.
Underpromise and overdeliver is better than the reverse.
Second, don't normalize deviance. Both shuttle disasters happened because known problems were accepted as routine. The O-ring erosion before Challenger, the foam shedding before Columbia. Engineers flagged these issues and management rationalized them away.
It hasn't killed us yet is not a safety standard.
Third, listen to engineers. In both disasters, engineers tried to stop the missions. They were overruled by managers facing schedule pressure. Any organization that prioritizes schedule over safety when qualified experts are raising alarms is headed for tragedy.
The engineers were right, management was wrong, and people died.
Fourth, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but also don't accept compromises that undermine your core mission. The shuttle was compromised by military requirements, budget constraints, and political mandates until it couldn't achieve its original goals.
The Delta wings for Air Force missions that never flew.
Fifth, reusability is only valuable if it actually reduces costs. The shuttle proved that reusing hardware doesn't automatically mean savings. If refurbishment costs more than building new, you've gained nothing. SpaceX learned from this. Their reusability approach is genuinely cheaper.
What about the organizational lessons?
The Columbia Accident Investigation Board made recommendations about NASA's culture that go beyond just the shuttle. They talked about creating genuine safety independence, encouraging dissent, breaking down communication barriers between engineers and managers.
Has NASA implemented those recommendations?
Some. NASA created new safety oversight structures, improved communication channels, instituted what they call dissenting opinion processes. Whether the culture has fundamentally changed, that's harder to assess. Culture is resistant to mandates.
You can't legislate good organizational culture.
You can create structures that support it, but ultimately it comes down to whether leaders actually want to hear bad news and whether employees feel safe delivering it.
Let's talk about the comparison to Apollo, because you mentioned it's the only US program that cost more.
Apollo cost about $25 to $28 billion in 1970s dollars, which translates to roughly $257 to $280 billion adjusted to today. So yes, Apollo cost more than the shuttle.
But Apollo got us to the moon.
Exactly. Apollo achieved something unprecedented in human history: 6 crewed lunar landings. The entire program was completed in 13 years. The shuttle flew for 30 years and kept us in low Earth orbit.
Cost per accomplishment. Apollo looks better.
It depends how you measure accomplishment. If scientific output matters, the shuttle enabled decades of research on Hubble and ISS. If inspiration matters, Apollo was more dramatic, but the shuttle normalized space. If exploration matters, Apollo wins by a mile.
The shuttle was supposed to enable exploration. It became a substitute for it.
That's the tragedy. The shuttle was conceived as a stepping stone, cheap access to orbit that would fund and enable bigger things. Instead, it consumed so much budget that there was nothing left for bigger things.
All right, Elena, final question. Was the space shuttle worth it?
I've spent time studying this program, and I still find that question impossible to answer definitively.
Cop out.
Okay, let me try. No, the shuttle as it actually operated was not worth the price paid, in money or lives. The original promises were fantasy, the cost overruns were obscene, and the disasters were preventable.
But
But the shuttle existed in a political and budgetary context that didn't allow for better options. NASA wasn't going to get the funding for a fully reusable system. The choice wasn't between the shuttle we got and some ideal vehicle. It was between the shuttle and possibly nothing.
This or nothing isn't a great defense.
It's not, but it's the reality of government programs. The shuttle preserved human spaceflight capability during decades when political will for exploration had evaporated. It kept NASA relevant, kept the workforce employed, kept the dream alive.
The dream of what? Circling the Earth forever?
The dream of humans living and working in space. And now we're seeing that dream expand again. Commercial space stations, return to the moon with Artemis, serious talk about Mars. That wouldn't be possible without the infrastructure and experience the shuttle era built.
So your verdict is wrong vehicle, wrong promises, but maybe not the wrong choice given the alternatives?
My verdict is that the shuttle was a magnificent, flawed, expensive, deadly, awe-inspiring, frustrating machine that accomplished things that shouldn't have been possible while failing to deliver on almost everything it promised. It's a monument to human ambition and human fallibility in equal measure.
That's a lot of adjectives.
It was a lot of spacecraft.
Let me offer a sharper verdict.
Please.
The Space Shuttle was a $209 billion lesson in how not to do space exploration. It proved that reusability without cost reduction is pointless, that organizational culture eats safety procedures for breakfast, and that political expedience is toxic to engineering programs. 14 people died because managers prioritized schedule over safety and because NASA couldn't admit that its flagship program was fundamentally flawed.
That's harsh.
It's deserved. The shuttle was sold on lies, operated on hubris, and ended in defeat. America went from landing on the moon to begging Russia for rides. That's not a success story by any measure.
And yet
what?
And yet, I watched the final shuttle landing in 2011, and I cried. I think a lot of people did. Because whatever the shuttle was as a program, and I agree with much of your criticism, it was also something beautiful. Those orbiters were graceful machines. The launches were magnificent. The people who flew them and built them and fixed them were heroes.
The people were never the problem.
No, the people, especially the engineers, were extraordinary. They accomplished impossible things with flawed tools and inadequate support. The shuttle's achievements belong to them.
And the failures belong to...
The failures belong to a system that prioritized politics over engineering, schedule over safety, and optimism over honesty. The failures belong to managers who didn't listen and leaders who made promises they couldn't keep. The failures belong to all of us who wanted to believe that space travel had become routine when it hadn't.
Because if space travel is routine, nobody has to feel scared when the teacher rides the rocket.
Krista McAuliffe's students were watching because NASA had convinced them it was safe. It wasn't safe. It was never safe. And the pretense that it was killed her and 6 others.
Where does this leave us for the future?
I hope it leaves us wiser. SpaceX has shown that commercial approaches can dramatically reduce costs. Artemis is trying imperfectly to return us to the moon. The private space industry is flourishing. There are reasons for optimism.
But
the lessons of the shuttle era aren't self-enforcing. Every new program, every new organization has to learn them again. Schedule pressure will always exist. Budget constraints will always tempt shortcuts. Managers will always be inclined to hear good news over bad. The shuttle's ghosts are always waiting for us if we forget.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
Question the promises. Demand honesty about costs and risks. Listen to engineers, especially when they're worried, and understand that space travel is hard, dangerous, and expensive, and that pretending otherwise doesn't make it safer. It just makes the disasters more shocking when they come.
On that cheerful note...
I'm sorry, this is a heavy topic.
It is, but it's an important one. $209 billion, 135 missions, 14 lives, 30 years, and countless lessons learned, some of them learned too late.
The Space Shuttle was history's most expensive space program. Whether it was history's greatest waste or history's necessary step depends on what we do next.
And on whether we actually learned the lessons it taught us.
That's the test that never ends.
Dr. Elena Vasquez, thank you for spending time with us dissecting this program.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you to everyone listening. And if you're old enough to remember watching shuttle launches, take a moment to appreciate what we had, flawed, expensive, and dangerous though it was. We may never see anything quite like it again.
I'm Marcus Chen.
And I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez.
Thanks for listening to the $209 billion Space Shuttle, history's most expensive program. Keep looking up carefully.